My 63 years felt heavy. Each one a stone laid on my chest. I lay in the hospital bed, the antiseptic scent thick in the air, a dull ache throbbing where the surgeons had worked. My hip was mended, they said, but the world felt broken. I was a man dependent, vulnerable, tethered to tubes and the shifting schedule of nurses. The phone, a thin rectangle of plastic, felt alien in my hand. It vibrated, a jolt. "Mr. Vance," my lawyer, Marcus Stanton, said, his voice unusually grave. "I have disturbing news. A summons just arrived. It's a stalking complaint. Against you." The accusation hung in the sterile room. Absurd, impossible. Stalking. Me. Here, my gaze drifted to the IV drip, then to the pale winter light filtering through the window. I had nothing left to lose, it seemed. Nothing but my name. Perhaps. The absurdity escalated in the following days. Photographs, grainy images pulled from surveillance cameras, arrived via email from Marcus, a man, undeniably me, or so it appeared, loitering outside a woman's office building. Another, caught on a distant lens, making a phone call from a park bench. Eyewitness statements, signed affidavits, spoke of late-night calls, silent hung-up lines, and a persistent, unsettling presence. "They have phone records," Marcus informed me, his voice tight with disbelief, "spoofed numbers. But the calls originate from cell towers near the alleged victim's home." I lay there, my body still healing. The impossibility of it all, a cruel joke. I couldn't walk without assistance, barely stood for more than a few minutes. Yet, this phantom me, a robust, mobile version of myself, was out there, meticulously harassing someone. The psychological horror was insidious, a slow poison. Someone had stolen my face, my name, and was using it to construct a narrative of menace. My identity, once a solid, familiar thing, was being warped, rewritten by an unseen hand. It was not just an attack on my freedom, but on the very essence of who I was. The world, it seemed, was willing to believe a stranger's version of me over my own lived reality. Marcus, a man whose quiet skepticism I had come to trust over decades, began to dig. He started with the woman, Eleanor Finch, a mid-level executive at a tech firm I vaguely remembered doing business with years ago. Her accusations were detailed, chilling, but as he followed the digital breadcrumbs, a pattern emerged, subtle at first, then glaring. The surveillance photos, when scrutinized by an expert, showed minute discrepancies in build. Gate, the alleged phone calls, though originating from numbers linked to me, were routed through obscure voice-over IP services, a sophisticated spoofing operation. "Elijah," Marcus called one evening, the urgency in his voice palpable. "I think I found him," or at least a trace. He described a man named Kenneth Holt, a former client of Eleanor's, recently laid off, with a history of online harassment and a disturbing obsession with her. More chilling, however, were the uncanny physical similarities. Holt was younger, perhaps 40, but with a striking resemblance to me. He had even, Marcus discovered, adopted some of my superficial mannerisms, observed from old corporate videos of my public speaking engagements. Social media profiles, meticulously scrubbed but not entirely erased, showed an evolving digital persona, one that increasingly mirrored my own. Fake profiles, burner phones, a carefully constructed illusion. The antagonist remained in the shadows, a ghost, replicating my life. But the outlines of a true manipulator were beginning to form, piece by chilling piece. The confrontation, when it came, was not in a courtroom drama, but in Marcus's hushed law office. Eleanor Finch sat opposite me, her face pale, guarded. Marcus presented the evidence, a concise, irrefutable chronology. The hospital records proving my physical incapacity. The expert analysis of the surveillance photos highlighting the subtle differences. The IP addresses tracing the spoofed calls not to my hospital room, but to a cheap apartment complex on the city's outskirts. Kenneth Holt's address. He showed Eleanor Holt's own social media. The disturbing progression of identity theft. The eerie adoption of my public persona. Eleanor listened, her eyes fixed on the documents, her initial disbelief giving way to a dawning, terrible realization. The true manipulator was not me, the frail man recovering from surgery, but a phantom, a mimic. The evidence was concrete, overwhelming. No dramatic confession was needed. The truth, meticulously assembled, spoke for itself. The brief, sharp meeting ended with Eleanor's quiet apology, a whispered acknowledgement of her error, her own fear having blinded her. The quiet control of the process, the absence of theatrics, was more devastating than any shouted accusation. My physical recovery was slow, marked by the steady rhythm of physical therapy and the gradual reclaiming of my mobility. The stalking charges were, of course, dropped, and Holt was eventually apprehended, facing a litany of charges for harassment and identity theft. The legal process, though vindicating, left its own scars, a lingering unease about the fragility of reputation in the digital age. Months later, I sat with my ex-wife, Clara, over coffee. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce. A quiet, mutual parting many years ago. She had followed the news, concerned. "I always knew it wasn't you, Elijah," she said, stirring her coffee. "You were many things, but never that." I offered a small, weary smiles. "It's a strange world, Clara, where a man can be in two places at once, one real, one manufactured." The incident left me with a quiet understanding of truth, a hard-won perspective. Technology, a double-edged sword, could both obscure and reveal. Reputation, I learned, was a fragile construct, easily manipulated. But human endurance, the stubborn refusal to be defined by another's lie, was a powerful force. Truth, I reflected, does not always prevail quickly. Often, it must be unearthed, stone by painful stone. But it always leaves a trace, a whisper in the digital wind, a subtle flaw in a forged image, a single, undeniable fact that eventually, inevitably, brings the darkness into the light. And in that, I found a measure of peace.